Sometimes I dream about Afghanistan still. It haunts my dreams, whether it's waking up in the middle of the night and remembering some of the soldiers that lost their lives, or the people that I met along the way, or the children that played in the Salong River, or the horror of what happened on that last day of withdrawal, where I think the entire world, and especially American troops and intelligence officers and people who were very connected to the region, journalists like me, woke up and realized, oh my God, President Biden is pulling everyone and everything out. He's turning over Afghanistan to the Taliban and to the Haqqanis and to the terrorists after more than 20 years of war. There wasn't a better way to handle this? Of course there was. Is America weaker now than it was 4 years ago? We are. Have the dominoes fallen all across the globe? They have. Have the terrorists reconstituted themselves back in a region that I can only describe as being 2,000 years old, like going back in history, like seeing something that you can't even imagine, a place where time has stood still in some areas. Are people in America forgetting about the dangers that lurk in South Asia and the Middle East, about these extremist organizations, because we haven't really seen a massive attack like we saw on September 11th? And frankly, so many people are young now. They're too young. They don't remember it. They don't remember what that was like. Waking up in the morning, getting those phone calls, or being in New York City and watching the planes hit the towers, or seeing it on television, or wondering every day with like some kind of weird PTSD, is my plane going to come down? Am I going to die? What's going to happen? Is there going to be another attack? Or watching our young troops and older troops and men and women in the intelligence community take off to parts of the world never to be seen again, only to return home in caskets with flags draped across their coffins, to be greeted at Andrews Air Force Base, and to be forgotten, relegated to some kind of history, a number, a cross at Arlington Cemetery. That's what President Biden did when he decided to make the worst decision that he could have possibly made, one that to me is criminal. That is what he did when he exposed all of us to another round of horror and terrorism that, believe me, is just around the corner, guys. It's you and I are going to pay the price for what he is doing at the southern border. Let me ask you if you feel safer now from terrorism than ever before. Do you feel safer? We spent over 20 years, America's longest war. Do you feel any safer after what Biden did? Do you think that this wide open border and the terrorists that are pouring in here, do you think that there's not sleeper cells hiding amongst them, waiting for a moment to target us? And what about our allies? And what about all of the women that are now subjugated to the horrors, inhumane treatment, abuse, and death by these extremist regimes that are now thumbing their nose at you and I and the United States of America and saying, guess what? And NATO, we beat you. We beat you. And we're going to beat you again. And we're going to take you down. And guess what? we're going to have another maybe 20, 40, 50 years of war after the next attack. There's no way to bury this one. We need to stand on principles, our foundation, our Constitution, what it means to be an American, a beacon of light for the rest of the world. You and I deserve a nation that fulfills its promises. In Afghanistan, we didn't keep those promises. We lied. We've got to stop lying to our allies. In the same place American heroes fought and died for 20 years, women are now not allowed to attend schools. They are forced to adhere to extreme religious rules. They are being murdered. They are being beaten. They are being tortured. The allies we fought with and used as translators were left behind for dead, waiting to be hunted by the Taliban, waiting to be hunted by Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is now traveling the globe trotting, even though we have like a $10 million bounty on his head. We're not going to do shit about it. Why? Why are we allowing this to happen? It isn't right. When I was in Afghanistan and I would cover the war, I would travel with our troops to the front lines, embedded with troops from all the different striker units. I'd go in with guys that had just come in for the first time, as well as with people that had been there over and over and over again because of stopgap, because they had to keep sending our troops back because we didn't have enough of them. I went on helos. I went with the parajumpers on rescues. I was in Helmand province. I saw the horrors and I saw the beauty of Afghanistan. And then I saw us make these, and I heard with my own ears the promises we made. I watched the money, our taxpayer dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars being lost, not being accounted for. I watched people line their pockets on the blood of Americans and Afghans. Not only did our government not fulfill the promises to their allies, they did not fulfill the promises to the troops that sacrificed everything, including my husband, who gave his eyes and has never once complained about losing his eyesight. Never once said, "Why me?" Never once. Never heard it once coming out of his mouth. But I see it every single day. What's going to happen next? What are the price? And what is the price that we all are going to pay for these horrific policies that are criminal in nature? On today's show, we're diving deep into what happened into the country of Afghanistan, what it means for America's national security, and why women are so vital to a nation's success and rejuvenation, and why women need to be put first, and mothers and daughters, so that we can save future generations of men. Not just in Afghanistan, but around the globe. But first, let's talk about Goldco. Are you concerned about the endless flood of illegal immigration at the southern border? How about the $1 trillion being added to the national debt every 100 days? It's no wonder thousands of hardworking, patriotic Americans, including myself, are learning how to protect and diversify their retirement savings with precious metals. That's why I've partnered with the top-rated company, Goldco. Listen to the current offer. Get a free 2024 wealth protection kit and learn how to possibly get, listen to this, $10,000 in bonus silver as a listener of this show while supplies last. I've told you the most important thing you can do is diversify. If you don't trust me, research it yourself. They've helped people like you and me place over $3.5 billion in gold and silver. Protect your family's financial future and freedom. Get started today at saralikesgold.com. That's SARA likesgold.com, or call 855-823-GOLD. That's 855-823-GOLD. Get your free gold kit from Goldco and learn how to get $10,000 in bonus silver. Sara, Sara, likesgold.com or 855-823-4653. That's Sara, likesgold.com or call 855-823-GOLD. Happy to have Jason Criss Howk here on the show. Jason, you're a retired veteran of the United States Army and you're the director of Global Friends of Afghanistan. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This is such an important topic that we cannot forget about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, anytime. I wanted to talk to you. You and I direct message so frequently on the back end. I see all the work that you're doing. Let's go back a little ways to the withdrawal, and then we'll go back to what got you started and where your career began. But the withdrawal from Afghanistan and how it happened under the Biden administration, I know it was gut-wrenching for me. I felt like it was a crime the way it happened, what happened to not only the 13 Marines and all the civilians that were wounded and injured, and the loss of life, but just the overwhelming sacrifices that took place over the 20 plus years in Afghanistan. Felt like it just went down. It got washed down a toilet. I was devastated by it. What did you feel? What was going through your mind?
Yeah, absolutely the same. It went against all the advice that of the sane people that were giving advice on Afghanistan, that we had to keep a small counterterrorism footprint there, something to bolster the very young Afghan military and the even younger Afghan Air Force. And there was just no way they could handle the amount of terrorists that are flowing around that region on their own. So it was devastating to see us just wipe it all away with one decision and go against all military advice on what we should do. And it stunned a lot of our NATO partners, too. They didn't think we would do something so drastic to cause the collapse.
Yeah, that was very drastic. I remember just previously, before the withdrawal, before we even knew that was going to happen, I was in communication with sources of mine in Pakistan, some of them that had access, of course, to Afghanistan and what was going on in some of the villages in eastern Afghanistan, and all the way from eastern Afghanistan all the way down to Helmand province, all through that whole corridor that had been taken hold of by the Taliban. But they were saying to me, hey, wait a minute, you guys don't understand. They're reopening basically a lot of the villages to Al-Qaeda and other groups. They're covering for them. They're paying money to stay in some of these villages secretly. There's training grounds in these areas. We're really seeing a resurgence of some terrorist activity here that we hadn't seen in years. I was wondering if you heard about that as well, if that was something that you were hearing, and if you're hearing about that now.
Yeah, absolutely. Even before after the announcement, but before we ended the withdrawal, they were definitely terrorist organizations pushing in with probably the assistance of the Pakistani military. And then after the Taliban had fully secured everything and all resistance had stopped, it opened the floodgates. And I and a lot of other people are monitoring the number of terrorists flooding in from different areas and terrorist groups reigniting, people coming from North Africa, from Syria, from all over the world to pile in there. I just saw a story the other day that they're seeing a lot more Arabic signs being posted in Kabul, and hearing people speak in Arabic, which is not a native language in Afghanistan. So you've got this surge happening, and the terrorist epicenter of the world is now back in Afghanistan. And I've talked to my friends that are, do counterterrorism, that are still in the military and in the government, and they're seeing it, but we're not hearing about it. We're not hearing from the administration that this is a problem. We've got to change direction. We're just going on this same horrible path that we know where it leads. It's the next September 11th.
Oh, absolutely. And especially right now where we're seeing not only did I cover the war in Afghanistan, of course, spending all those years there, but the reason I went to Afghanistan, the reason I begged the Washington Times to allow me to be the Pentagon correspondent was because I had spent so many years on the U.S.-Mexico border and saw the failures. This is more than 20 years ago, saw the failures and the big gaping holes in our immigration system, and as well as along the border, that I believed would be taken advantage of by these terrorist organizations, by Al Qaeda, by other groups like Islamic State, ISIS, and groups in Yemen and other groups throughout the globe that would possibly want to do harm to America. I saw that and I said, well, I think we need to focus not just on the border, but on the global issue of terrorism. And I want to cover the war. And I went out there to cover that war. So now 20 years later, and I'm going to ask you this, not only have we acquiesced Afghanistan back to the terrorists and to the Talibs and Taliban, and I know I piss off the Pakistanis if I say Taliban, they want to say Taliban, but to them, but we've opened up our border wide open to everybody from all over the world. We have no idea the majority of these people, who they are. That was obvious from the story that was just pushed in the New York Post, where we arrested 8 people from Tajikistan that were connected supposedly to terrorism groups. Jenny Terr, who used to work for me, broke that story. This is very, very important. These are issues that, have taken the sacrifices that we've made over the last 20 years and basically kind of washed out all the success that we had, and taken those sacrifices and washed them out as well if we're not doing anything to stop this.
Yeah, it's stunning, the level of naivete. We're just putting the blinders on and pretending this isn't going to come home. And as you're watching Europe now experiencing another uptick in random people getting stabbed in the neck by Islamist terrorists, this is coming. It's not like it's a surprise. The world has very lax borders. Terrorists and narco criminals and human traffickers love that. It makes their job easy. And it's going to get worse. We have a really bad cancer in South Asia now that we've abandoned that area, and it's going to get worse.
Hey, folks, you know how much I love MyPillow, and thank you so much, Mike Lindell, for being a sponsor of the Sara Carter Show. You folks, when Mike Lindell first launched MyPillow, it was solely about a solution for one problem. But with the dedication of his team, they've expanded their offerings to include hundreds of products and to spread the word that they will not be part of a cancel culture. They are also hosting a $25 extravaganza, and it's going on now. I want you to take a listen to this. If you use promo code Carter, Carter, at mypillow.com, you will get the sale price and free shipping on any order over $75. Here are some of the products available for only $25. Listen to this. 2-pack MyPillows, MyPillow sandals. I've got those. Luxurious 6-pack towel sets. Got those. The brand new 4-pack dish towels. Got those. I got them all for my daughter. She just bought a house near me. I love Sophia, and I want to make sure her and her family have MyPillow all over the house. Small dog beds, very important. Macy Daisy buttercups laying on one right below my desk. Beach towels, and so much more. Offer savings with promo code Carter, Carter. Get the Giza Dream bed sheets as well, queen size, for, listen to this, $59.98 with promo code. They are so soft and feel so luxurious. You will not regret it. 60% off my slippers and mattress toppers for as low as $99.99. Go to mypillow.com or call 800-685-7221 today to get in the $25 extravaganza today. Be sure to use code Carter to get the sale price and free shipping on your order over $75. Call 800-685-7221 or go to mypillow.com, promo code Carter. Again, mypillow.com, promo code Carter. There are a few things that you said I think are so important that I want to touch on. One is, how the Biden administration wanted to wash its hands of this problem. And I saw that happening early on, even after, this wild evacuation where it was so chaotic and disorganized and dangerous and deadly, and people were falling out of planes, and people got onto planes that shouldn't have been there, and others were left outside the gate only to face their death, at the hands of the Talibs or the bombing of Abbey Gate. You can't really wash your hands of this, because just like you said earlier, and just like I mentioned to you, you have Arabs inside Afghanistan. This is South Asia for all of you out there that don't know the region. And I don't expect everybody to know or understand this part of the world. It's not accessible to many people, but it's South Asia. The languages there are Pashto and Dari, and, you know, a variety of other tribal, maybe dialects. And you have Arabs there that are there now that are probably more than likely, I would say 99.9%, connected to some extremist organization and practicing and training once again to do what? To target the West, to target Europe, America, Western assets across the globe. How does the Biden administration turn their back on this? How does the intelligence community avoid paying attention to what is going on there? Because it's all coming home to roost right at our border.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's just bizarre. And I talk to, Afghans every day. They just look, they're like, Jason, I don't understand. America was supposed to be the beacon of human rights and, counterterrorism and democracy. And here you've let this terrorist organization take over the country, who has created gender apartheid system, which, complete misogyny at every angle. And they are inviting all the terrorists in the world to come and train. They're opening, all these madrasas that are really just brainwashing centers for young terrorists in the Haqqani model, pulled over from Pakistan. And they're just cranking out young brainwashed men that are going to be looking for some way to join a terrorist organization or some kind of violent militant organization. It is just you've created another factory besides the one that used to sit in Pakistan.
Right. And your organization, and I want to get right to it now because I can spend all day talking about the Haqqanis, and we'll probably get there and with all of the terror related issues that we're facing because of the horrific decision made by Biden. But your organization's biggest area of focus is gender apartheid, how women's rights have declined since the Taliban took over. And I was there when women were going to school. I was there. You and I were talking about it. I met Nancy Dupree at Kabul University. She's since passed away. She was a huge advocate and lived in the region, an American who loved the region, who loved the people. They called her the grandma of Afghanistan because she could talk not only to the Taliban and they wouldn't touch her. For some reason, she was like, had some kind of force field around her and deal with the locals. But I remember seeing the young girls going to Kabul University, even if they were wearing hijab, they were in their jeans and they were excited and they were in school and they were learning. And now they're being beaten and they're being kept inside their culottes and they're not allowed to speak freely.
Yeah, it's absolutely what the big movement to try to reverse this is calling a gender apartheid system. This is no different than the racial apartheid in South Africa. They are just treated as subhumans. They have no rights. They are going to be married off early. They're going to be sold as barter so that families can have money to feed their other children. They're not going to get education past the 6th grade. That's going to drop away even lower, of course. They'll have no ability to work. All of that is happening right now. So they are below a human existence as far as their human rights is concerned. And there's a global effort by a number of human rights groups, by veterans, by former diplomats, by people from the you name it. There is a huge collaborative effort to change this, to make gender apartheid part of a violation of human rights, make that a legal crime that can be punished, so that you have another way to beat down these regimes that do this in Iran and Afghanistan and other countries, because it destroys half the population, which destroys your entire future as a nation.
How is that not a crime already?
Absolutely.
I remember, yeah. How is that not a crime already? How is it not a crime to violate another person's human rights? Is it just, are they trying to say it's a cultural thing? I got a story and I'm going to tell it to you and you tell me how many of these stories you heard. I had a woman who was a friend of mine. I don't know what's happened to her since, but every time I traveled to Afghanistan, I'd talk to her. Her husband beat her so brutally and abused her so badly since she was a young girl that she hated him. She hated him with all of her heart. She told me every time I looked at him, I despised everything about him. She said one day he started to have a heart attack, and he was in the kitchen, and he was telling me to call for an ambulance. And I watched him fall to the ground, and I just stood over him and looked at him and just stared at him until he died. I never forgot that story, because it was like, this is not about a woman's choice. She's not choosing to be a part of the abuse. She's not like, oh, I can't wait to get married when I'm 9 years old and be abused for 20 years and, end my life with unhappiness and sorrow. Like, they don't want this. They don't want this. So anybody who tries to make that argument is just lying to themselves. This is not a cultural issue.
Yeah, it's not cultural. It's not religious. I have a lot of Muslim women friends that I've known for years and years. This is not a requirement of any religion. This is people who are afraid of women, and especially afraid of smart women, trying to restrict them so that nobody will oppose them. Because if you can stop the women from being educated, you can stop all the boys from being educated. Because that gives you a great pool of ignorant young people to turn into terrorists. And this is happening in Africa and Asia. There are places all over the world where it's a planned scheme. It's a strategy by Islamist terrorist groups to create a group of fodder that can be used in their armies, to build a force. And they know you have to take out the smart women to do that, because women will not want their kids to do it.
That's so important. Talk about that, because I used to say that with my friend Mary. We didn't put it into your words sound so much more succinct, but we would say, a society that downgrades their women is a society that is not balanced. It is a chaotic society. It's a society that has lost itself. This is why we see so much war and unhappiness and failure in Afghanistan and in other parts of the world. A society that basically relegates their women to less than a dog, less than their fighting dogs, right? I could sell my daughter for this much, but my fighting dog for that much. That's how they view women. And you're right, the children, and especially the boys, they're suffering the same abuse. Men are also being abused in a society that functions this way. Talk a little bit about that and how dangerous that is, what you've seen, what you've experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in the prisons where we had these fighters captured and terrorists captured in Afghanistan, and seen the result of what those boys turn into, it's a brainwashing, it's a radicalization you can't erase. I saw it down in Bogota when I went down there to study how their program worked, trying to de-radicalize these young men. If you get them off on their own, away from a smart mother or smart grandmother or sister, you can do whatever you want to them. A good friend of mine grew up in Afghanistan and then was on the streets in Pakistan and was pulled into this madrasa that was one of these, Islamist hardcore Haqqani-style madrasas. And he was there until September 11th, getting sexually abused, physically abused, brainwashed, beaten. It's not how often you get beaten or how much you get beaten. It's just how much abuse can you take and not die. And they were taught to just hate everybody who wasn't in that madrasa. That was the brainwashing. They didn't learn anything else except that they should hate anybody who isn't just like them. And so that is the mindset he left with. And luckily, when he got into Afghanistan to kill British forces that were near the post that he was sent to, he realized he was treated kindly by the Americans and the Brits that worked there. And he realized he'd been lied to his whole life. And they had brainwashed him to hate people that didn't hate him. And so that turned his life around. They got him into a de-radicalization center, and it changed his life. He's got a whole monograph written up that needs to be published. It's explaining that process of what they do to young boys and how you come out the other end and how you can be de-radicalized and turn back into a human again. It is a heartbreaking destruction of a life. And we see it in gangs. We see it in racial supremacist groups and white supremacy groups and, Nazi organizations. They take young boys and they brainwash them and they keep them away from smart women that can pull them out of that because they want that cannon fodder to use.
They become a weapon.
Absolutely.
They just become the weapon themselves. And that's really kind of a a terrifying thought that if we ignore this, we ignore what's happening, how bad things can eventually get. Because we're watching that even in the United States, where I think we've, especially under this administration right now, has turned its back on what's happening on a global level. And I think on a global level, we kind of are ignoring what's really going on. I mean, are you really as terrified as I am that, they're already planning attacks? There's already sleeper cells here. They're ready to, at any moment to launch an attack in the United States. I mean, what happened on September 11th, and I try to get this through people's heads, and I don't know if they get it because not everybody was in the fight there, right? Not everybody had a family member that was in the military or in the service. But it changed our nation for over 20 years. It was America's longest war.
Yeah.
Hitting the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the flight that crashed, eventually the Madrid train bombings, the attacks in London, all of the extenuating attacks, the Paris, the Charlie Hebdo, the Bataclan, I can go on and on and on. But it changed our world for 20 plus years. If there's another major attack in America, we're just going to be dragged right back into something.
Yeah, I think it is already underway. That was the big warning a lot of us had to the Biden administration as they came in. You have to leave your counterterrorism force. If you let the government collapse and the military collapse, you're going to have a new, terrorist training center the size of Texas again, and you're going to be on the road to the next September 11th. I think we're there. We're already in the year 2000. This is exactly how things looked. Red lights are blinking everywhere with terrorist groups, the interconnectivity of terrorist groups, the travel of them, how they arrange themselves. We just published a report by one of the last CIA, the NDS director of Afghanistan, about what he was seeing right at the end, how bad things were in 2021. And now it's only gotten worse. So we're right there. And I think we should realize that the reason that Gaza, is in turmoil right now, and the reason the Houthis are trying to shut down a major ocean transit route, and the reason that Lebanon is heating up again, and Iran is, flexing their muscles, it's because of what we did in Afghanistan. When that collapse happened, and Haqqani and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban walked in and said, "We just beat NATO. Everybody get behind us. This is our time. We just did it. We showed that we could do it. An Islamist terrorist group can do this. So we are back. We're stronger than ever. And you need to get behind us and get moving." And they are all excited by this. I just saw a video the other day of terrorists in Syria that were trained in Afghanistan that have gone back to Syria to fight. And they're proudly saying, "Yeah, we were just in the Afghanistan terrorist training camps. We're over here now to fight." Like, they're proud. They're excited that they are on the march. NATO was beaten by an Islamist terrorist group with Pakistan's support, and we are on the march. We can take over the world and rebuild the caliphate, which is the big goal. I mean, there's an interconnectivity of all these organizations, and they feel they are winning. It is only going to get worse.
It's not only going to get worse, but we really are ignoring it to such an extreme extent. Right now, Sirajuddin Haqqani is traveling through the world. I mean, this is one of he was head of the militant arm of the Haqqanis. I mean, he worked right alongside his father and his other brothers. He killed so many Americans. By the way, a lot of Pakistanis too, even though I see them as an extension of Pakistan, like the wild tiger. And I remember Admiral Mullen. I knew him. I used to travel with him when he was at the Pentagon. But, he eventually admitted that they were like the right arm or something of the Pakistan military. But Sirajuddin Haqqani is traveling to Saudi Arabia to do Hajj. He's hanging out in the Persian Gulf. Isn't there still a bounty on his head from the United States? Or have we just said, okay, you know what? Let bygones be bygones. Thanks, Siraj. Have a good life. You and your black turban look really good traveling around the world right now.
Yeah, that one was an absolute insane moment. When we saw him, I saw very early because I read Afghan press every morning on Twitter at about 4 a.m. So I catch it as soon as I wake up, what's going on? And I saw Haqqani popping up in UAE, sitting down with the president. And I was like, oh my God. Haqqani, $10 million bounty on his head, wanted by the U.S., is in a U.S. partner country where we have U.S. troop station, and he's meeting with their world leader. They're elevating this guy. And then he shows up at the Hajj in Saudi Arabia. And I texted the videos to a couple of former Tier 1 commanders, and they said we were stunned. Everybody started commenting on it, and a lot of people who've been doing counterterrorism all their life just said counterterrorism is dead. We are letting, Saudi Arabia is letting, UAE is letting, the UN, with which the US could have vetoed, is letting the bloodiest hands out of the fight wander around the world and pretend that he is a world leader and to be recognized and be celebrated. I mean, he was getting hugged and kissed on the Hajj as the warrior who helped defeat NATO. That's insane. This is insane.
Yeah. And this is all happening while we have to deal with inflation. We're going to the grocery store. Most Americans don't understand the magnitude of this because we are kind of isolated from that part of the world. And a lot of young Americans have not experienced it because they don't remember September 11th the way we do. Yeah. They don't really understand that the same way. I want to go back to your organization. Are you talking with women in the region? How are you able to know? I mean, I'm not asking for any kind of like that would give away any type of maybe operations that allow you to talk to people, because I know how sensitive this is, but are you able to get on the ground assessments of what's happening to some of these young girls in the region? I know it's very difficult. I mean, are they being kept locked down? Is nobody's in school anymore? There's obviously no teachers. What's going on?
Yeah, we do. We have members who are still, a lot of people who are part of GFA and our network of people that aren't even publicly in it are talking to women all the time. We have an Idea Shura program where we ask people under 30 to write down their own essay about what's happening and what do they want for their future, so we can hear what's happening. Of course, we all follow the press, but all of us have friends and family in and out of Afghanistan. I mean, on LinkedIn, our global friends following, I think 1/3 of it's in Kabul. And we only post in English, and because there's a generation of people who speak English in Afghanistan. So it is a way that we can keep track of what's going on without having to give away who is telling us what is happening. But we are constantly in touch. We stay closely in touch with Richard Bennett, who's the Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in Afghanistan. We'd all known him for years. So we reached out to him as soon as he was appointed to make sure that his assessments were part of what we were understanding. And we could feed people to him to give assessments of what's happening on the ground. And he just gave a very strong outline of what has happened and how bad things are to the UN this week. I think just yesterday and this morning he was talking. So there's a great update from him on what is happening and what kind of an apartheid system has been set up. And it really describes the horror of what it's like to be born a girl in Afghanistan now.
I'm telling you, every single day, I can't get over the fact that I still have a family that I need to get out of there. And I have not been able to, not one day of my life, have a little bit of peace over that. Like, it doesn't matter what time of the day, and I'm sure it happens to you too, but to know that they have little girls and the person that I am trying to help, how terrified he is that his daughters are going to lose their lives in that nation. It's a gut-wrenching feeling. What can we do to help? How can I help your organization? How can our listeners, all of these amazing women out there, all of you out there who listen to my podcast, and men that want to be able to help, what can we do?
I think there's a few critical steps. One, there's an End Gender Apartheid campaign that is ongoing. They are trying to get a nation to take this topic, put it into the UN system, and make it a violation of human rights and make it part of that law. There's things you can sign up online. You can find it if you put in hashtag End Gender Apartheid. They have Twitter and all social media. But go to their website, push that. If you know an elected official, we should be pushing that. If you can make that illegal, it's one more tool of leverage to use against organizations like the Taliban and Haqqani. Also, if you're in America or you're in Europe, help the refugees who got here to integrate so they can have a successful life in your country, because if they don't, it's only going to make more and more problems. There are more refugees that are going to continue to come. I think another big way to help is to keep this conversation going. We need to have people writing about and talking about Afghanistan and helping Afghans say what they want to say. We're a small nonprofit at Global Friends of Afghanistan. Nobody gets a paycheck over there. It's all volunteer. So find organizations that are helping to spread the word, help them do it. We'll have a conference again this year, our third conference, where we just try to get together Afghan people to talk about their future. And we want to help to elevate them to some level so that the diplomats will stop trying to talk to the bloody Haqqanis and the Taliban and start talking to the Afghans who are against them, which is 90% of Afghanistan doesn't want to live in their prison. So help to elevate all those groups and help them organize. That's something that many organizations around the world are doing. But if you want to be a part of it, you can reach out to us at Global Friends of Afghanistan. But just don't let this story get off the front page. It just about fell out of the newspapers. We've got to keep it in there. It may not be on the front page, but at least don't let it get off onto the back page under a classified ad.
Yeah, we certainly don't want the front page story to be a terror cell that trained in Afghanistan, entered the United States through the southern border, and God help us, killed this many number of Americans in a sleeper cell incident or something of that nature, something horrific. I don't even want to say what I'm thinking because I think it could get far worse than September 11th.
Yeah.
And you know what, Jason, I hope you come back on the show. You are awesome. The work that you're doing is incredible. I believe it's going to save lives here in the United States as well as overseas. I mean, I want to do everything I can to help amplify what you're doing and to reach out to our Afghan partners and those that want to see a future in that region that is far different than what Siraj Haqqani and these insane extremist terrorist organizations are creating right now. Whatever you need, let me know. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Jason, for coming on the Sarah Carter Show. If you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, give us a like and a follow and send us to a friend if you like the show. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Sarah Carter Show on your favorite podcast app. We really appreciate it. Follow me on Truth at Sarah Carter Official, on X at Sarah Carter DC, and on Instagram at S Carter DC. God bless you. God bless our nation. God bless all the women of Afghanistan who are suffering under a tyrannical regime. May God help them find their way. And God bless the great state of Texas.